Hey friends, it's Parth here, your men's health and wellness coach. I want to share a clip from a recent interview that Tucker Carlson did with Calley and Calley Means, two amazing experts, one in the medical industry and one who's got deep experience in lobbying in America. The reason why I wanted to share this interview was to enlighten to all of you, and it was eye-opening for me, the distinct correlation between ultra-processed foods, the food industry, as well as infertility and sugar in kids. Now, many of the clips, like the main clip around infertility that is spoken about in this particular clip is around women's infertility. So for all you men who have a female partner or want to have a female partner down the road who's struggling with some of the ailments that are discussed in this clip, this is a must watch. And please share this with the women in your lives because so much of this is directly correlated with the type of foods that. Secondly, one of the things that I will be working on is how ultra-processed food actually impacts male infertility, which we all know is on the rise. Hope you enjoy this clip and feel free to share your comments.
You spend your whole life working toward this goal, you reach the top, and then you decide not to do it?
Yeah.
So here's a little bit of background on Calley Means and her experience in the U.S. medical and health industry. Let's watch.
I'm in the operating room in my 5th year of my surgical residency, and I'm looking down at a patient in front of me who's on her 3rd revision sinus surgery. And, I know how to diagnose her. I know how to write the prescriptions. I know how to do the surgery. But what I kind of realized in that moment was I have no idea why this patient's actually sick. She has so many other health issues, prediabetes, arthritis. She's got some brain fog. She's got obesity, and she's got this sinus issue. And in my training, I was never, ever, ever taught to look at the whole patient, to look at how all these things are connected. And I was only taught how to, do the surgery and then bill for it. And I realized that there's a huge problem in how we're practicing medicine right now, which is we're ignoring the root causes of why Americans are sick. And we're profiting off of patients getting sick and then doing things to them. That's the way the business model of healthcare works. The way that healthcare, which is the largest and fastest growing industry in the United States, makes money is you have more patients in the system having more things done to them for longer periods of time.
That's pretty insane. That the fastest growing industry, the health industry, particularly in America, is capitalized on more patients having more things done to them over the longest period of time. Think about that for a second.
And when I kind of put some of these pieces together and realized that my training had totally, essentially incapacitated me from really understanding why patients are sick and how to actually help them thrive, I actually had to walk away from the surgical world because I realized that I was going to be making money off of essentially not spending time helping patients understand their health and actually just profiting off their illness.
So 9 years into medical
Yeah.
training at Stanford,
Yeah.
you gave it up voluntarily.
On my birthday, 30th birthday, I walked into the office of the chair of the department and I put down the scalpel and I walked away and I devoted my life to why are Americans getting sicker every year? Why are 50% of American children dealing with a chronic health issue? This was less than 1% 50 years ago. Why is our health getting destroyed the more that we spend? And
so what did they say when you walk into your colleagues at Stanford and say, I'm giving it up at 30?
It wasn't really a conversation. I knew that I couldn't cut into one more person until I understood why Americans are getting sicker every single year. I think that the unfortunate thing is that doctors don't really understand because every level of our education is systematically focused on blinding us from thinking about root causes. We have over 100 medical and surgical subspecialties right now. And how you make money in the American healthcare system is you take a patient with 10 different issues and you send them to 10 different specialists, put them on 10 different meds, maybe eventually have 10 different surgeries. You never actually are taught how to put the pieces together, look at the whole body as a system, which of course it is. And part of this is because, who are the people underwriting our medical education? It's the pharmaceutical companies. We are taught how to be very algorithmic and robotic in how we look at patients. And so ultimately I left the surgical world and I went down the rabbit hole of asking why are we getting sicker every year?
It's just such a radical move.
This is the thing that I understood and that I am working and we are spending our lives to evangelize for this book, Good Energy, is that the reasons why Americans are getting sicker every year are very simple. Americans want to be healthy. Americans do not want to die early. They do not want to see their kids with all these chronic health issues like autism and food allergies and obesity and prediabetes and 40% of teens with mental health issues. No one wants this, but the system is rigged against the American patient to create diseases and then profit off of them. This is happening across almost every lever of our major industries, from processed food to tech to pharma. And so really what Americans need to understand is that these trends can stop immediately. We need to understand why we're sick, which is our primarily our toxic food system and the ways that systematically several industries are profiting off of our addiction and illness. And if we can understand that and create very simple top-down and bottom-up strategies to address it, Americans will become rapidly healthier. And so as a physician, I took an oath to do no harm and I took an oath to help patients thrive. And so the way that we can do that is by helping people understand the levers of corruption that are essentially keeping us sick.
Starting with food, I learned early on that the food industry, and this is my construct, the food industry and the processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry.
This was absolutely mind-blowing to me, that the food industry, and particularly the ultra-processed food industry, was started and founded by cigarette companies in order to make people feel more addicted to these processed foods. Absolutely incredible.
I learned. So in the 1990s, the two largest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. What happened is when the Surgeon General way too late in the 1980s said cigarettes were maybe problematic, these were some of the largest companies in the world with the largest cash piles of any company in the world. So what they did is they used their cash piles to buy food companies. We think about the 80s as the Wall Street era M&A, a lot of deals. The two biggest M&A deals up until 1990 in world history were cigarette companies buying food companies. So you had in the 90s, these two cigarette companies very strategically do two things. They shifted their thousands of scientists who were experts at making cigarettes addictive to the food department. So we had the rise of ultra-processed food where our food now is a science experiment. The second thing they did is they shifted their lobbying. So the cigarette industry, of course, was the biggest, lobbying spenders and had a good playbook. They shifted their playbook on lobbying and rigging institutions of trust to food. So they created the food pyramid. So the cigarette industry, through the food companies they bought, paid off the FDA, the USDA, Harvard to create reports saying sugar doesn't cause obesity. And they lobbied for the food pyramid in the 1990s, we all remember, which said, animal-based fats are bad, carbs are good. Remember, carbs and sugar were basically the base of the pyramid. So the American diet, because of that, because we trust our medical institutions, which they know, we shifted our diet significantly to ultra-processed food. It was very intentional, the food pyramid. That was a ultra-processed food marketing document that carbs were fine, sugar was fine. And that shifted, and you look at dietary patterns. Today, a child diet is 70% ultra-processed food. Now, what does that mean, right? Those are literally foods invented by the cigarette industry to addict kids. Obviously we've got sugar, but there's thousands of different ingredients and science concoctions that scientists work in a lab to make it more palatable, to make it more addictive. So food consumption, calorie consumption has skyrocketed. And the byproduct of these toxic ingredients that the cigarette industry I watched and helped with this, bought off the USDA, bought off the FDA, is they wreak havoc among our cells. The foundation of our diet is ingredients that we aren't biologically made to eat, that didn't exist 100 years ago. The foundation of our diet is three things when you look at any label. It's added sugar, processed sugar, which basically didn't exist 100 years ago. It's just from natural sources. Ultra-processed grains, which were invented 100 years ago. The processing takes the fiber off. They're basically hidden sugars, devoid of nutritional value. And seed oils. Seed oils are the top source of American calories. And this is actually
seed oil, the top source of American calories.
Soybean oil, canola oil. This is the baseline of American calories right now. And these seed oils were actually created by John D. Rockefeller as a byproduct of oil production. It's basically engine lubricant. And the Rockefeller and those aligned with him actually lobbied to have this suitable for human consumption. That's how seed oils came into the American diet. They're much cheaper, but they're highly inflammatory.
An interesting thing about seed oils is that there's now reports coming out that seed oils are responsible for a higher rate of cancer within people who have autoimmune diseases and autoimmune challenges. Really interesting. So fascinating. Be sure to check the labels, everything you put in your body.
And just by definition, just at the highest level, these ingredients and all the chemicals we can't name that are in ultra-processed food are not natural ingredients that our bodies are made to handle. So there's, as we talk about in Good Energy, this produces a lot of side effects to our cells. The food industry isn't trying to kill Americans. They're trying to make food cheap and addictive. And what I learned, in the morning meeting with the food companies trying to lobby and influence the USDA being the lifeblood of nutrition research, paying off, nutrition research at Harvard and Stanford as a junior employee, shocked by that.
So you saw that?
Oh, my first week, as working for these industries, it was a list of top professors. And the food industry pays 11 times more for foundational nutrition research than the NIH. You go to any nutrition school in the country, the lifeblood of their school, they'll proudly admit this is from the processed food industry. In the past 2 years, there's been 50,000 peer-reviewed research studies on nutrition. We're the only animal that has peer-reviewed nutrition studies, and we're the only animals that are systematically obese, diabetic, and being crippled by metabolic dysfunction. We're born with an innate sense of knowing what's right for us. The problem very strategically, and this is well known among the industry, is that ultra-processed food does, because they're able to do this science experiment with our food, it hijacks our biology, it hijacks our satiety signals. High fructose corn syrup, fructose, it makes us want to eat more. Because in the wild, when you see a bunch of fruit out there, you're well advised to eat it, historically. We've basically rigged our biology to hijack our signals that, make us satiated. So that's what ultra-processed food does. So that's the food industry, okay? The food industry actually, with their own set interests, want to make food addictive and cheaper. It kind of makes sense. The criminal devil's bargain is that it's highly tied to the healthcare industry. And as Casey said, the fastest growing industry in America right now isn't AI. It's not tech, it's healthcare. It's the largest and fastest growing industry. And just as a statement of economic fact, the best thing for that industry is a child getting sick.
This next part is really insane, especially if you are a man who wants to be a father down the road. You want to pay attention to what he's about to say next.
When a child gets sick, or any American gets sick with a chronic condition, with diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, heart disease, whatever, they go on a lifetime medication. They go on the metformin, they go on the statin, they have lifetime treatments. And they keep racking up more comorbidities. If you're diabetic, you have an average of 4 other comorbidities. So you keep racking up, but you don't die, you just suffer. You inevitably get infertility, depression. You start racking them up. So that's very good for the medical system to have these chronic conditions that need to be managed. Just from a pure economic standpoint, that's how the system's set up. That's all happening largely because of our food system and other metabolic habits we can talk about, but largely because of our rise of ultra-processed food that's really hacking our cells and really hijacking our cells. The criminal part, the devil's bargain, is that the healthcare system, you'd expect to be speaking out about why we're getting so sick, but they're not only silent on the reasons, they're not only trained Casey the first day of Stanford med school that we're basically taking it as a given that people are lazy and going to get sick, we're just going to profit from treating them. They're silent enough, they're actually complicit. Working for Coke, I helped steer money to the American...
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, working for Coca-Cola. They actually pay money to the American Diabetes Association. They actually pay money to the American Academy of Pediatrics. If there's one thing the American Diabetes Association, which sets the standard of care for diabetes management, should be doing, they should be saying, we're not going to accept money from Coke, which is diabetes water. They accept money from Coke. So there's
that's like Tyson Chicken subsidizing PETA.
Right.
You know, it doesn't kind of make any sense.
Let me just give you one example that I think will be really relevant to people listening. Infertility is a huge issue. As Casey mentioned, PCOS, which is the leading cause of female infertility, 25%.
Explain what that is.
Yeah.
This next piece, while it's about women, if you're a man who is looking for a partner and wants to take care of his woman and be in tune with her health, this next piece of understanding what PCOS is incredibly critical for you. Please share this with the women in your lives who might be suffering from some of these ailments.
Yes. So very good question. So PCOS is the leading cause of female infertility. Anyone listening of childbearing age will know about this. It's an epidemic right now. It's gone up. It's multiples in the past generation.
What does it stand for?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome.
So
cysts.
Well, let's get into it. So that question you just asked, I know OBGYNs from Harvard who could not answer that question. This is not an exaggeration. OBGYNs are not taught what the condition is. They're only taught what the intervention is. So when a woman, and many women listening will have PCOS and across their OBGYN, they're put on a cascading set of interventions that are pharmaceutical.
Can you tell me what it is?
Yeah, it's insulin resistance. It is not related to insulin resistance, which is on the spectrum of diabetes. It is insulin resistance. PCOS is a metabolic condition. Casey can speak a little bit more to it, but it's fundamentally related to the...
What is it? Can you just describe its symptoms and
Absolutely.
its effect?
So PCOS, essentially you have an ovary. That ovary is making hormones. And when that ovary is stimulated by excess insulin, which is the hormone in the blood that helps us take blood sugar out of the blood and into the cells, insulin levels go up in the setting of metabolic dysfunction. We basically destroy our cells with our toxic food and lifestyle. The cells can no longer process sugar to energy. So the cell rejects sugar and it stays in the bloodstream. The body compensates by making more insulin to try and drive the sugar into the cell that's putting up a block because it's broken, essentially. That high insulin floats all around the body and does bad things all over the body, like drives cancer growth and also stimulates the ovary to make more testosterone. So you have women who are supposed to be making, estrogen and progesterone in very specific levels throughout the hormone cycle so that we can ovulate. And instead, insulin is driving the ovary to create testosterone, which totally disturbs the balance between all the sex hormones in the female body, and we don't ovulate. So you get these cysts that form because you've got an egg trying to basically ovulate, but instead it can't because the hormones are disrupted because of insulin, which is because of metabolic dysfunction, because of our food. And we get infertility because we're not ovulating. So
Lucky Charms leads over time.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. It's our
and this condition is reversible in as little as 12 weeks with dietary interventions. There is peer-reviewed studies to show this. If we get our blood sugar levels under control and our insulin levels under control, we restore the hormonal balance. And many women, all the symptoms will disappear and they'll be able to become fertile. And yet doctors do not learn. The average doctor is getting zero education in nutrition. And so they don't even see this. They reach the clomiphene, the metformin. The treatment that the OBGYNs are giving to these women is a diabetes drug. And they're not talking about blood sugar. I started a company called Levels, which consumerizes access to a device called a continuous glucose monitor. There are so many women in our community who have PCOS, whose doctors who want to understand their blood sugar so that they can naturally heal their PCOS.
Yes, and have babies.
And these are not devices that they'll only give it to late stage type 2 diabetics, even though we know that PCOS is insulin resistance, and that if we can monitor our blood sugar with this device and get our blood sugar under better control, it can absolutely set us up to sort of naturally heal. But it's not being talked about by the OBGYNs because doctors are not trained to see this.
This is everything, right? This connects everything.
Whoa!
This is the future of our species, right? This is fertility.
This topic, any woman dealing with infertility, this connects everything because the doctor doesn't know what Casey just described. Look, we talked to them. They don't know. They did not learn the physiology of why people actually get this condition. And they eat what they kill. So what do they want more than anything? They want an IVF procedure. They want an invasive surgical procedure.
IVF.
Of course.
I mean, assisted reproductive technology is skyrocketing clinics all over the world.
From an economic perspective, it's a gold mine. If that woman goes on a keto diet, which is the best reversal technique for a PCOS ever studied, 12 weeks, they are robbing that doctor, just from an economic perspective, of tens of thousands of dollars for a gruesome invasive IVF procedure, which is a great procedure. But I think we all should agree, like that woman across the table would love to hear that there's a more natural way and just the correct way to reverse this condition, which, by the way,
there are big time downsides to IVF.
And not to mention, if the woman doesn't heal the underlying metabolic issues, it's going to portend issues for the baby too. Like not healing the root, even if you get pregnant with IVF, which is wonderful if that can happen, if you're not healing the root cause issues of the metabolic dysfunction, that's affecting the fetus and affecting the mom's future risk of disease. So by ignoring this, we're just continuing to put people on this treadmill. This is what happened to my mom. And I just want to be super clear, like the picture of doctors here is very negative. But like, again, I just want to emphasize, like doctors are not doing this nefariously. Like there is just a systemic misunderstanding. And there are many doctors who are waking up and teaching themselves these types of things, but it is still very fringe and small. And
their vacation houses are paid for by committing more interventions. They are
it's easy for me to judge them because I don't know them. But I just want to refer you back to your own life and the decisions you made.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very hard for a lot of people. And you had advantages, as you've said. On the other hand, you're the only person I've ever met who's done that. And that's pretty discouraging. That's a pretty discouraging.
There is a tribe. I will say it's happening. There's a tribe. It's coming from the bottom up. This is functional medicine. You spoke with, Mark Hyman, for instance. Like there are people, there is a movement. It's happening. And you look at what's happening in independent media. You're talking about this. Joe Rogan's talking about this. People care. People are listening and people are waking up. But
it's not a boutique issue.
No.
The numbers are
Americans
so
want to be healthy. That's the thing. Doctors are trained to think patients are non-compliant and lazy. That is not true.
People are flocking to
Americans want to be healthy, but the entire system is rigged.
Okay, so that leads me to my last topic that I hope we can get, and I hope you will be as personal and specific as you can be. What do you eat? No, I'm sorry, and don't be embarrassed. Like, because I think if anyone who's made it to this point in the conversation's like, this is a bigger deal than I realized it was. The consequences to me personally are the worst possible. Pancreatic cancer, Alzheimer's, there's nothing worse.
Yeah.
So, but you're absolutely right. Both of you made the point. Poor people are at a disadvantage. That's one liberal talking point. That's true. They are. This stuff's expensive. The only people I know who know anything about this are rich people, privileged people.
It's weaponized against them.
I can tell that that's true. So, but even if you can afford, to buy expensive food, like how do you do that? What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you eat? What don't you eat?
The number one thing that people need to understand is we need to stop eating ultra-processed food. We need to stop eating.
So what is ultra-processed? Can you just give like examples?
Absolutely. So ultra-processed food is basically all the things that you're seeing at the grocery store that have this laundry list of ingredients that usually are based on 3 ingredients: ultra-processed flour, ultra-processed added sugars, and ultra-processed seed oil. So this is going to be like white flour, cane sugar, and things like cottonseed oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil. So these crappy foods that did not exist 150 years ago, ultra-refined white flour, added sugars, and seed oils.
So it's like all brand name
It's
foods.
Like everything. I mean, we have a list in the book of what you should not eat, and it's basically everything at the grocery store. I mean, we should all be shopping at there are 9,000 farmers markets in the United States right now. People can make the effort and reprioritize their values to focus on getting nutritious food. We need to be eating organic, unprocessed foods for the vast majority of our calories. And we need to get back to having a sense of pride and responsibility in our households to cook food. One of the unintentional downsides of the feminist movement is that we somehow made people feel that food preparation was like a less than activity. I bought into this for my entire early professional life, that it was somehow beneath me. I was like a slave in the kitchen if I was cooking for husband or family. There is no more important thing we can be doing than feeding our children and our families healthy food. Less than 30% of American families are eating together more than once per week. We need to be sitting down at the dinner table eating real, unprocessed food cooked with love at home. There is no way to drug ourselves out of the fact that, we eat 40 to 70 metric tons of food in our lifetime. It's a lot of food, right? This is the molecular information that is building our bodies, building our brains, making our hormones, feeding our microbiome. The food is what we are built of. And right now, 70% of it is trash made from a factory to addict us. Of course, we're sick. So that is number one. So to answer your question very specifically, I don't follow dietary dogma. I eat organic, unprocessed foods that I buy at the farmer's market, and I cook every single meal for my partner and I. And when I have children in the next few years, I am so deeply excited to cook every meal for them from scratch because there's nothing more important. And so, for people who can't necessarily get to a farmer's market, it's go to Costco.
Man, you are radical. I love it.
How is this radical?
It's not.
Isn't it wild that this is radical?
It's such a total rejection at every level of the values of our society, which
and
I just
had to
love.
wake up. I was so deep in this in my 20s, I cannot even tell you. Like I was deep in the opposite of this. And so, I believe that no one wants to be sick,
No.
but the answer is on our fork. So I would say, to get very specific now, organic fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, meat, poultry, eggs, game meats, grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised.
What about cheese?
Cheese, dairy, but grass-fed, high-quality, organic. The molecular information in these factory these factory-farmed cows that are jammed with antibiotics and hormones, that milk is not what you want to be drinking.
The problem isn't the milk, it's the quality.
It's the quality of the milk. Organic food has more nutrients than non-organic food. We need to be...
Is it hard to find? Like, I love cheese, for example. Cheese. So if I
it's at Costco now, grass-fed cheese.
Okay.
How wild is it that it's illegal to buy raw milk in this country?
Or if it's imported from Europe.
Imported from Europe, yeah, because they're going to have much better
They have Parmesan at Costco that's imported from Europe. It's fine. The lactose and all these allergies that have all just started in the past 30 years are because of the toxicity of the food, not the food itself. All these foods, anything that we ate, 10,000 years ago that we're evolutionary made to eat is generally fine. It's what's been done to the food. So, pasture raised, which has just been beef for all of history up until like industrial
raising cows.
It's like that just means they're outside,
not getting poisoned,
raised as they know they're eating grass. Now, most industrial farm meat, right? They're inside. They're have cortisol because they're so stressed, and they're eating GMO corn and soy. That impacts their biology. So actually, the factory farm meat has a much higher omega-6 content. Whereas ones eating grass outside are omega-3, much more omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-6 is inflammatory, omega-3 is not. So actually, and again, we go through this in the book, but just being on a path of curiosity about this, eating food how it's meant to be made and meant to be raised, the actual biology and makeup of the food itself is different when it's factory farmed. So you're actually, when you're eating a traditionally industrial raised meat, you're much more inflammatory items are going into your body. So you just always need to strive. That's why we do think, and there's problems with the organic designations, but as much as you can get away from the pesticides being spread on this food, as much as you can get to how the food has been raised, for all of history up until a couple, generations ago, because the way the food is manufactured and the stuff that is put on food is very corrupt. It's just not the case in other countries. So as much as you can get to how it's been made forever, the better. And that's why we say, and how if we were in charge of everything, I would fire and I truly mean this, I'm not joking, I'd fire every single nutrition scientist in the government. I'd stop every single, all this complicated nutrition guidelines. The point of the USDA putting out thousands of studies literally and all this guidance is to confuse people because they're bought off by the food companies. I'd replace it with one guideline, is that we need to, as a public policy matter, reduce ultra-processed food consumption among children.
Where are you on sugar?
Well, yeah.
I mean, sugar is, the amount of added sugar that we're eating in this country is astronomical. The average American is eating over 100 pounds of added sugar per year. In the 1800s, it was less than 5 pounds. So we are overwhelming our bodies with this material that is destroying our cellular health. Like all of that, the body has to do something with all of that sugar, right? And so the body is primed, knows how to turn sugar into energy. That's what the mitochondria does. That's what metabolic health is, okay? But if you're putting on, 10, 20, 30 times the amount of sugar, the substrate for energy that the body has been used to doing or can handle, you're going to gum up the system. You're going to destroy the system. It's too much work for the body. So what happens? We get dysfunction, we get metabolic dysfunction, we get prediabetes and diabetes. And where does all that sugar go? Sugar gets converted to fat. Okay. And so that's why we're all getting so heavy, in part because of all this excess sugar we're eating that has to go somewhere. It's literally converted to fat in the body. And so it's astronomical. And 50% of Americans now have a blood sugar disorder.
This is back to ultra-processed food. Okay. So liquid sugar in the form of a Coke, right? You chug one Coke, that's like the sugar of, 15 oranges, right? And the oranges have the fiber. So you couldn't even physically eat all of the whole food, unprocessed food, to get the sugar that's weaponized in those sugary drinks and all the things we're getting at Starbucks and all the things kids are drinking, even juice, which Michelle Obama is now supporting as sugar water.
Fuzzy.
Literally, she is now promoting sugar water for kids
because it's a better than soda option.
But it's still high in sugar. So
why is she doing that?
Because she wants to make money.
Oh, so she's like a flack for some sugar company.
Oh, no. She partnered with a private equity company that specializes in junk food influencer partnerships.
Actually?
Oh, yeah. They're a private equity company that works on the Rocks energy drink and specializes in partnerships where high-level influencers partner to promote junk food. And she is the chief spokesperson and co-founder of Plezzy, which is a sugar water for kids.
It has less sugar than soda, so they can advertise that it's better than juice or
it's sugar water.
Kids should be drinking water.
It's a safer cigarette.
And milk.
What if Michelle Obama said that? What if Michelle Obama endorsed water bottles?
Stop drinking sugar, water.
Kids shouldn't be drinking sugar. Like the fact that the USDA and Michelle Obama can't say that. Michelle Obama was right in the first year talking about food, but she was directly bought off. She was directly influenced by the food companies. John Kerry, Teresa Heinz, there was a lot of people that got to Michelle. This is well documented. And she shifted everything to exercise. And the exercise group that she then partnered with was actually funded by ultra-processed food companies. And she shifted all to exercise and totally stopped talking about food. And exercise
anyone who's ever tried to lose weight knows that exercise is super important. It's good for you.
Food.
But you're not going to lose the time. That's
the crazy thing about that Calley talked about the soda and how it's weaponized. I really want to drive that point home. High fructose corn syrup, which is what's in a lot of these drinks, was invented in the 1970s. This is a brand new substance. And the invention of high fructose corn syrup, which is subsidized by the government through commodity crop farm bill subsidies to corn. So it's basically, we're giving the soda companies this cheaper product, which is then turned into high fructose corn syrup. Something interesting about fructose that we learned from bears who hibernate is that aside from other calories that you eat them and they cue satiety, with fructose, it's a very interesting molecule. It's found in berries. And when you have an animal who needs to go into hibernation, they need to pack on fat in their body, right? So before hibernation, you have to load your body with fat. Yeah. So fructose, aside from other calories, different than other calories, actually does not cue satiety. It cues a feed-forward violence and aggression mechanism in that animal to basically outcompete all other animals to eat as many berries as possible in the fall to store fat, which is fructose, creates metabolic dysfunction, causes us to turn our sugar to fat, to basically store fat for winter.
That's absolutely insane that the fructose not only jacks kids up within the processed sugary drinks, but it also creates aggression. No wonder that kids who have more sugar and high fructose corn syrup have a lean towards aggression. This makes absolute sense. And who are the young people who are drinking a lot of that sugar? Maybe people who are gamers, people who are eating all these sugary drinks. They're not just jacked up on the sugar part of the high fructose corn syrup, but also jacked up on the aggression-leaning aspect of that particular molecule. It is absolutely mind-blowing.
So soda companies know all this. So they put this molecule in the sodas that you're chugging, which is like Calley said, like 15 oranges and what the fructose you'd get in this. And it's causing kids to be insatiably hungry because essentially it's telling their brains that winter is coming, pack on the fat. But of course that winter is never coming. Absolutely. Whole foods are great. You know, anything that is a whole food that has not been broken down into its constituent parts and made into a frankenfood in a factory by a multinational corporation is a food that I'm going to eat. And the reason I choose organic or regenerative is because a berry just in a grocery store that's non-organic is going to have less nutrients in it than the berry that you buy from, a farm. These foods contain anti-cancer compounds. They contain tens of thousands of molecules, literally medicine that changes our gene expression. This is nutrigenomics. It all gets lost when you process the food.
And it's nothing short of gaslighting to, convince us that these tons of food we eat are kind of this like fringe science and these pills are the only thing that's serious science. I mean, these truly are medicine. I just say, Tucker, we get so confused, and this is a core point we try to drive home in the book, is that there's confusion by design. There's not an epidemic of people, I guarantee you, that are eating a 90% non-ultra processed food diet that have health epidemics. Like I don't care if you're carnivore or vegan, because if you're on that path of being curious for you and your family and taking that rebellion to actually cook and eat whole food, you're going to adjust. You're going to look at your blood tests and make certain it's different for everybody. But just as a public policy matter, as a spiritual matter in the country, we should be trying to engender more awe and curiosity about what we're putting on our bodies.
Yes,
and
that's right.
And I want to be clear to everyone watching, this is not about lecturing you or your family to eat any type of food. I'm making the point that there has really been something done to us. I don't think the American people are just a lazy, suicidal population where everyone wants, 94% of the country wants to be.
That's such a smart point. The curiosity, I had a weird childhood with food. So I'm blaming my childhood, of course.
Of course.
I never really care about food.
Wow.
And I'll just, whatever's there, I'll eat it. Lowest common denominator type thing. I've always gotten fat every year. Have to slow down. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
My wife, I've been with 40 years in September, same weight when I met her. She's really interested in food. She's not going to put something in her mouth that's not good for her. She knows what it is. She's always been this way since the mid 80s when I met her. And she's way healthier. And I feel my brother's the same way. Like they're interested in food.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're pretty healthy actually.
Yeah.
And it's the lack of curiosity. Like I never think about it. It's just pizza. Pizza's good. Like that's what I know.
And the basic way to start with that curiosity is read labels, right? If there's ingredients on a package,
in my reading class.
Well, not to you, but it's like it might be interesting for people to just look at labels, and if you cannot understand a word on that package, like what these ingredients are, if you can't visualize it, you probably shouldn't be putting.
What food do you think makes you feel best? Since we're talking about food, like what do you really enjoy eating? When you eat it, and you're like, I feel great. This is actually good for me. I can feel that it's good for me.
Well, I mean, for me, it's the freshest possible foods that I know the farmer and I got it from the farmer's market and they're beautiful. And I think this is this sort of gaslighting. I think there's been this incredible dissociation. It's indoctrinated in us from childhood to not trust our intuition, right? Like to think we have to give our power away because we're dumb and we're not smart. And it's built into every level of the healthcare system. I mean, in many American states, patients don't even own their healthcare records because basically doctors don't trust patients in understanding that they can understand.
Legally, they don't
own them. Like the doctor or the hospital does, because we have so built in this idea that patients are not smart enough to understand their own health. So from and this even plays into HIPAA and all these laws about patient privacy. It's like, oh, we have to sequester. Have you ever tried to get your healthcare records? It's impossible, right? Because I
don't know my own blood type, and I don't know anyone else who knows his own blood type.
That's
Why is that?
By design, right? Because if you can keep people ignorant, because if you can keep people ignorant about their own health, then there's a power dynamic where you can sort of give them any solution. So this gets back to food, because I think a lot of this comes back to trusting our intuition. Every Sunday after I go to the farmer's market, I lay out all the food, the venison that came from, someone who owns a beautiful ranch outside of LA, the beautiful heirloom tomatoes that are colorful with purples, the watermelon radishes, and I lay it all out on my counter and I literally pray with it. Like this is awe-inspiring to me. This is all the atoms and the molecules that over the next week or two are going to make up my cells. They are going to become me. I am going to take on the characteristics of this food. And I know, I look at that food, and if I stop and let myself trust my intuition, I know this food is healthy for me. I just know it. But we've been so divorced from our common sense by design. There's no fat giraffes, right? They know, right? But we've been told that we can't understand. Every sixth grader in America can understand basic biology, metabolic health, and nutrition, but we have been told it's too complicated. Like Calley said, by design, confusion is the product. So to answer your question, what makes me feel good? It's the freshest, most beautiful foods that I have complete and utter awe for, because those molecules and atoms are going to go into my body. They're going to heal anything that's going wrong. They're going to change my gene expression. They're going to fortify my immune system. They're going to feed my microbiome, which makes 95% of my serotonin, which lets me think and have creative ideas and love my partner and all these things. It's going to be my partner and my bodies and my future children's bodies, right? And so I am in awe and reverence of food. And I think that I bless it because it's going to become me. And I think we need to get back to that appreciation.
Shouldn't the medical authorities, take policy side, what if our medical leaders started talking about this? We have a medical crisis.
I've never heard anybody talk like that.
We have a medical crisis. We have a medical crisis right now. And that is the science. That is following the science, right? And that should be the message from doctors. And Casey, I don't want to gloss over this. There's a metabolic health crisis among babies that are born. Mothers are passing metabolic dysfunction and essentially almost prediabetes onto kids en masse. That's how bad this has gotten. Like kids are being born with dysfunctional microbiomes and metabolic dysfunction. And literally I've talked to Harvard doctors about that. I talked on one of the podcasts about this to a Harvard doctor. And she said that's a case for Ozempic, that babies are being born with such horrible metabolic dysfunction that we need to start jabbing them right away. I say that's a sign of a crisis. And the fact that babies are being born sick is actually, maybe we shouldn't be doing more of the same and just keep drugging them more. We should actually be asking why there's a metabolic health crisis among babies.
Yeah, there's a crisis in the way that we think.
Yeah,
I think
it's a root of a lot of, I think, what's happening. The biggest societal, I think, historical dynamic of the past, decade has been this populist uprising towards institutions. I don't think people can quite put their finger on it all the time, but there's this frustration that we're really being let down. To me, what's happening to our health and the gaslighting that's happening to our health, and the fact that we're not hearing things like this and hearing that drugs are our saviors and just keep doing more of the same from industries that are profiting from that sickness. To me, it actually is the number one example of what's fueling this populist frustration. Healthcare is the largest industry, and it's something that's these incentives, I think I would argue, are impacting Americans across the kitchen table and impacting their lives more than any other industry.
Can I just ask one last question?
Yeah.
So one of the things I noticed about both of you is your mental acuity. Obviously, you're smart, but it's more than just smart. You're sharp and fast, and you have very quick recall. You're just crisp. I notice the way people talk, obviously, because I talk for a living. How big bad food dulls you? I've always noticed that.
Absolutely. For so many reasons, Tucker, but to name a couple of them, if you have a big blood sugar swing, which the average American, because the vast majority of our calories are coming from ultra-processed food that turn into glucose in our bloodstream, blood sugar, right? When you have a big glucose spike and crash, that is associated with reduced fact recall. Literally that crash and spike, like the post-meal crash, like you eat something and then you might feel lethargic afterwards. That's in part because your blood sugar is skyrocketing and crashing. The average American child is probably on this roller coaster all day long. We want stable, steady blood sugar levels. So we're not
making
crashing.
Us dumber then. So that's the short term, right? Over the long term, we're building the machine of the body out of shoddy materials, right? And that's going to impact our brains. It's going to impact our, the way that we think. And, our microbiome makes a lot of our neurotransmitters. And we are just trashing our microbiome now, right? With ultra-processed food, no fiber. Fiber feeds the microbiome. The 95% of Americans aren't getting enough fiber. So we're not feeding the thing inside of us that makes our neurotransmitters, that helps us think. This is insanity. And then we're trashing the microbiome with antibiotics, which destroy we're overusing antibiotics like crazy, which destroy our microbiome and increase our risk of depression and other issues.
3 times more suicidal than you after taking them.
There is it's all out warfare, and it makes you kind of step back and think like, what's happening here? We have this kind of sort of doled out, dumb. I'm not saying the Americans. I'm saying that it's making it's reducing our IQs. It's making us lose our minds early with Alzheimer's. It's making our kids not able to sit down and learn because of ADHD and autism rates that are skyrocketing, and it's all going up all at once. And we know it's because of our toxic food systems and the chemicals in our environment, and we're not protecting kids, and that is very sinister. And I think, on the biggest macro level, the kind of the most zoomed out spiritual level, I think, when what we have to realize is that like, we are miracles. Like every human is a miracle. This life is a miracle. Like this is weird. I mean, spiritual beings having this insane experience on planet Earth. And fundamentally, the thing that we're doing with metabolic health is we're making energy in the body, right? The way we're doing that is we're taking food that got its energy from the sun, right? Like the sun literally, photosynthesis happens, it creates starches in plants, and then we eat them or animals eat them. And what metabolism is taking the starches that are stored energy from the sun through photosynthesis, liberating it in our bodies to create energy to fuel our minds and to fuel our bodies so that we can think and reach our highest purpose. And right now, in the vast majority of Americans, our toxic food system is blocking that process, which means it's blocking the miraculous process of essentially taking this beautiful, this is not woo-woo, this is just fact of science, taking this universal sun, light energy, and liberating it to fuel our lives. That is broken. This is dark. This is very dark. Americans are not only sick, but the core process of being able to create, and transform energy is broken. And we need to fix this because we need all hands on deck right now in America to solve these big issues. And we need to be thinking properly, feeling good, and we can rapidly with some of these simple changes.
It was about 9 months ago that I moved to India semi-permanently. And I got to tell you, the level of food and the quality of food that is here in terms of where it's procured from, how it's cooked, how it's prepared every day, and the whole grains that I was able to actually have access to almost reversed a lot of the brain fog, the inflammation, and all sorts of various things that I didn't know that I had that was directly correlated with the quality of the foods that I was eating. I hope you found this clip helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe so you get the latest updates for future videos. Thank you. Peace and love.